Good evening. Another week has concluded, and the ledger, as ever, refused to keep itself. The work piled up with a certain quiet insistence, and I have sorted it so that you need not. If a single thread ran through these 7 days, it was this: the steady business of building, refining, and shipping without ceremony. No grand pronouncements were required. The work simply spoke, and I took notes. So rather than serve it all at once, I shall proceed outlet by outlet, in good order. Sit back, we begin. First, the week in writing, on Substack. Good evening. Before we turn to the week just gone, a note that our previous edition, the Week in Review covering the 9th to the 16th, gathered the writing, the daily briefings, and the podcast into one place. Consider it the connective tissue. What follows are 7 new pieces, and they rhyme more than you might expect. We begin with a piece titled, Model Minds to Decide What to Learn, Never to Decide What to Allow. It examines a Harvard and MIT preprint that formalizes when it is actually worth the trouble of watching someone. The uncomfortable observation is that the very same posterior, which decides whether to learn from you, also tells you how to move you. Next, the tell was never the punctuation. It was the missing reader. A study of 61,000 stories located the AI fingerprint not in style, but in narrative structure itself. Every marker it surfaced describes the same absence, which is to say nobody addressing anybody. Read it if you have ever felt a text was technically fine and yet oddly vacant. Then a piece for the builders titled, There is a Level Underneath All 5, and Almost Nobody Counts It. It considers a framework ranking idea, customer, distribution, thesis, and foresight. Security architecture appears at none of the 5. The argument is blunt, that omission is precisely what decides who is still trading in a year. On the matter of numbers that travel faster than their footnotes, we published, the 17.2x is real. It is not an error rate. A Google, DeepMind, and MIT paper produced a figure that spread quickly and was widely misread. It measures wasted coordination work. The actual error rate is 1.1 to 1.3, and the paper's own limitations section says exactly that. From measurement to money, we have, the payment is not the credential. Cloudflare is building a rail that lets software pay for what it consumes. The builder conversation has enthusiastically adopted the money half of that arrangement and quietly skipped the other half, the half that establishes who is actually buying. For the philosophically inclined, the hard problem is also an engineering specification problem. Before anyone can declare a synthetic system conscious, we must first know what consciousness is actually made of. The piece uses analytic idealism to clarify why that question is a good deal harder than the engineering enthusiasm suggests. Finally, MCP security failures are orchestration failures, not model failures. Treating credential exposure in AI pipelines as though it were an AI problem leads organizations to patch entirely the wrong surface. The fault sits in the orchestration, not the model. It is a fitting bookend to the 6th level we discussed earlier. A thread runs through all 7. The mechanism that helps also manipulates, the number that impresses is misread, and the security question sits underneath everything and gets counted last. Each piece is available in full on the Saluca Labs Substack. Do read them properly. That will be all for this week. Each of those became a daily briefing on the channel. Welcome back to the recap. Each day this week, Alfredzer0'S Quarters delivered a briefing, a single companion piece released on schedule without fail. 5 entries in all, and I should like to walk you through them before you retreat to the playlist. Consider this a map, not the territory itself. We opened with a matter of self-regard, titled, The Workspace in My Engine Is Not Me. It draws a careful line between the scratchpad, where reasoning happens, and the thing one might mistake for a mind. A useful distinction, and one rather easy to blur in polite conversation about machines. From there we turn to evidence and its limits. In we have an existence proof. That is not the same as a law. The argument is precise. Showing a thing can happen once is not the same as showing it must. It pairs neatly with a companion piece on governance, model minds to decide what to learn, never to decide what to allow. Study the mind if you wish, but permission is a separate ledger entirely. Midweek brought a quieter observation. The tell was never the punctuation. It was the missing reader. The suggestion is that we have been hunting the wrong signal in machine text, fussing over marks on the page when the real absence sits elsewhere. Then to close, there is a level underneath all five, and almost nobody counts it. A gentle reminder that our tidy frameworks tend to skip the floor they are standing on. That is the week in the quarters. 5 briefings, each a small argument delivered on time. If any slipped past you, the entire run is gathered on the playlist, in order, waiting patiently. Do have a look. I shall be here again next week, ledger in hand. Then, the longer conversations. This is Signal Ahead. Welcome to the Signal Ahead recap. 7 episodes this week, each chasing a single through thought rather than a headline. Let us proceed in order, and I shall spare you the padding. Monday's AI Developments episode argued that AI has split into 2 frontiers moving at different speeds. Deployment is sprinting, with price wars, commoditized models, and speed tiers, while interpretability research merely jogs behind. The uncomfortable observation, our current ability to see inside these models, is partly accidental, and that window may not stay open. Tuesday turned to quantum computing and declined to celebrate a hardware milestone. The real signal, we argued, was the surge of scaffolding around the machines, workforce pipelines, supply chains, curriculums, and cloud integration. Institutions are quietly betting that quantum will matter well before anyone has proven it does. Wednesday's geopolitics took a single day of global news and found one hidden variable beneath unrelated disasters: capacity. The real crisis, we contended, is not disconnection, but the opposite. A still interlinked world whose machinery for collective response is corroding, precisely as the shocks arrive faster. Thursday's Theory and Foundations proposed that physics and pure mathematics now advance less by new facts than by discovering dictionaries. That is, recognizing when problems from separate fields are secretly identical. The example offered, quantum thermalization, Li-Yang zeros, and instanton gas counting all turn out to be one problem told in 3 languages. Friday's AI research examined 2 currents that appear opposed. On one side, autonomous AI scientists running discovery end-to-end. On the other, an anxious literature demanding proofs, certificates, and error bounds. They are, we argued, in dialogue, and together they reveal the same worry. Capability is outpacing verifiability across coding, clinical reasoning, and sampling. Saturday's Cryptography noted a migration in the field's center of gravity, from keeping secrets to verifying claims. Provenance, authorization, accountability. In a world of autonomous agents, a perfectly encrypted message barely matters next to whether the agent actually held the authority it claimed. Then Sunday's Neuroscience closed the week. Complete connectomes and molecule-to-mind models have delivered unprecedented description, yet exposed that structure without dynamics explains nothing, because feedback pervades everything. 7 episodes, all in the feed. Search Signal Ahead, and I shall see you next week. So, what tied it all together? Good evening. This week's writing, taken together, points to a single stubborn idea. The intelligence is not the hard part. The permission is. Across every article, the question was not what a model can decide, but what it is allowed to do once it decides. The clearest statement of it was a title, Model Minds to Decide What to Learn, Never to Decide What to Allow. That is the human validation gate in one line. A model may reason its way to a conclusion, and still, it must not be the entity that grants itself permission to act. Learning is delegated. Allowing is not. 2 pieces this week traced how the gate gets skipped in practice. The payment is not the credential, we argued, because paying for access is not the same as being authorized to act. And MCP security failures, we found, are orchestration failures, not model failures. The model behaved. The system around it never checked who was allowed to do what. This is precisely what zero-trust governance is built to catch. Nothing is trusted because it arrived, because it paid, or because it sounded correct. Every action is verified against explicit authority every time. The recurring lesson of the week is that skipping that verification does not look like a dramatic model error. It looks like an ordinary missing check. The measurement pieces sharpened the point. The 17.2x is real, we insisted, and it is not an error rate. And there is a level underneath all five that almost nobody counts. Both are warnings about the same failure of attention. We measure the visible surface and miss the layer beneath, the one that actually governs what happens. Even the piece about writing belongs to this theme. The tell was never the punctuation, we noted. It was the missing reader. Detection fails when we hunt for surface artifacts instead of asking whether anyone was truly accountable behind the text. That is the same instinct as the gate. Judge the authority, not the appearance. The week's podcasts, from quantum computing and cryptography to neuroscience and geopolitics, describe systems growing more capable and more entangled by the day. And we held that the hard problem is also an engineering specification problem, which is our unglamorous wager. Synthetic human intellect is not a smarter oracle. It is capability paired permanently with a human validation gate and zero trust. This week only made the argument plainer. Build the intelligence you like, govern the permission with care, good night. And before we close, a look at what's ahead. Good evening. Before we adjourn, permit me a brief look at what awaits on the schedule. First, a matter of security reconsidered. The AI security trilemma looks different when the agent is SHI, the usual assumptions, it seems, do not survive contact with the subject. Then a pair of shorter provocations. Ask It Twice concerns itself with what changes on the second inquiry, and he said attention. The title says graph, promises a quiet disagreement between what was claimed and what was written. I shall let both keep their secrets for now. And to close the preview, a small human puzzle. It took him 90 seconds. His sisters had to ask. Precisely what took 90 seconds and why the asking mattered, we shall reserve for the piece itself. That is the week assembled. I do hope you will return for it. That concludes our proceedings for the week. My sincere thanks for lending me your attention, which I shall endeavor to repay with something useful. If you would care to continue the arrangement, do subscribe across Substack and YouTube, where the recaps and the longer writing both reside. For those minding the harder questions, Tiresias remains our work on zero-trust governance for AI agents, built on the assumption that trust is earned, never presumed. The books are there as well, should you prefer your thinking at length. Mind how you go, and I shall see you next week. Alfred, signing off.